The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine waters of Pearl Harbor as Seaman First Class James Patterson adjusted his binoculars atop the USS Arizona's forward observation deck. It was December 7, 1941, and the Pacific Fleet lay anchored in what seemed like impenetrable security. The Hawaiian breeze carried the scent of plumeria and salt, while sailors prepared for what they expected to be another routine Sunday morning. Patterson had been scanning the horizon for nearly an hour when he noticed something peculiar. Distant specks appeared against the azure sky, growing larger with each passing moment. At first, he dismissed them as routine military exercises, perhaps Army Air Forces conducting training maneuvers from Wheeler Field. The tranquil scene below revealed battleships moored in neat rows along Battleship Row, their crews enjoying the leisurely pace of weekend duty. Commander Mitsuo Fukuda led the first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft. As they approached Oahu's northern coast, the seasoned pilot had spent months preparing for this moment, studying aerial photographs and memorizing every detail of the American naval base. Behind him flew Nakajima B-5 and Kate torpedo bombers, Aichi D-3 of Aldive bombers, and Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters, their engines humming with deadly precision. The Japanese strike force had departed from 6 aircraft carriers positioned to 100 miles north of Hawaii. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo commanded the task force from the flagship Akagi, while Vice Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's strategic vision guided the entire operation from Japan. The plan was audacious: deliver a crippling blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet before America could respond to Japanese expansion across Southeast Asia. As referenced in historical accounts from the Naval War College, the attack had been meticulously planned since early 1941. With Japanese intelligence gathering detailed information about American naval movements and defensive capabilities. At 0740 hours, Fukuda's radio crackled with the predetermined signal, Tora, Tora, Tora. The code words confirmed that complete surprise had been achieved. Below, American sailors continued their morning routines, unaware that their peaceful Sunday was about to transform into a day of infamy. The first bombs struck Ford Island's seaplane hangars, sending massive explosions skyward and alerting the entire harbor to the unthinkable reality. Patterson dropped his binoculars as the shockwave reached the Arizona, his mind struggling to process what his eyes witnessed. Japanese aircraft bore down on the battleships with devastating precision, their pilots executing months of training. In a matter of minutes. Within moments, the harbor erupted into chaos. Sailors scrambled to battle stations as claxons wailed across the fleet. The USS Oklahoma took multiple torpedo hits, beginning her fatal list to port. The USS West Virginia shuddered under the impact of 7 torpedoes, her crew fighting desperately to maintain stability, while water rushed through gaping holes in her hull. The peaceful morning that had begun with gentle Pacific breezes now raged, with the thunder of aircraft engines, the crash of exploding bombs, and the anguished cries of wounded sailors. America's sense of security, built upon the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, crumbled in the space of minutes as Japanese forces demonstrated that distance no longer guaranteed protection. The attack that would draw the United States into World War II had begun with devastating efficiency, forever altering the course of global history. The second wave of Japanese aircraft approached Pearl Harbor at 0-8-50 hours, led by Lieutenant Commander Shigekazu Shimazaki. 170 additional planes descended upon the already burning naval base, their pilots witnessing the devastating success of the initial assault. Thick black smoke billowed from damaged ships and burning fuel oil that spread across the harbor's surface like a deadly blanket. Aboard the USS Arizona, Seaman Patterson found himself thrown against the superstructure as a massive explosion rocked the battleship. The forward magazine had detonated after an armor-piercing bomb penetrated the deck, creating a fireball that rose 300 feet into the air. The explosion was so powerful that it lifted the 30-1,000-ton vessel partially out of the water before she settled back with a thunderous crash. Captain Franklin van Valkenburg and Admiral Isaac Kidd perished. instantly in the Arizona's destruction, joining over 1,000 sailors who would never see another sunrise. The ship's ammunition magazines continued to explode intermittently, sending debris raining down on nearby vessels and making rescue operations extremely hazardous. The USS Nevada, moored alone at the harbor's northern end, managed to get underway despite suffering significant damage. Her crew, led by Lieutenant Commander Francis Thomas, attempted to escape to open water while under continuous aerial attack. Japanese pilots, recognizing the opportunity to sink a battleship in the harbor channel and block the entrance, concentrated their efforts on the struggling vessel, as documented in official Navy records from the Pearl Harbor investigation. The Nevada's courageous attempt to reach the sea became one of the most dramatic episodes of the entire attack. Lieutenant Kenneth Taylor and Second Lieutenant George Welch, two Army Air Forces pilots stationed at Wheeler Field, managed to reach their P-40 Warhawk fighters despite the ongoing assault on their airfield. They took off under fire and engaged the Japanese aircraft in aerial combat, shooting down several enemy planes and providing the only effective American air resistance. During the attack, the Japanese assault extended beyond Pearl Harbor itself. Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and other military installations across Oahu came under heavy bombardment. At Wheeler Field, Japanese fighters strafed aircraft parked wingtip to wingtip, destroying 53 planes and damaging 29 others. The concentrated positioning of American aircraft intended to guard against sabotage made them perfect targets for aerial attack. Kaneohe Naval Air Station suffered similar devastation as Japanese dive bombers targeted the by Catalina flying boats moored in the bay. The lumbering patrol aircraft, crucial for long-range reconnaissance missions, were methodically destroyed by enemy fighters that swept across the water at low altitude. At Schofield Barracks, soldiers scrambled to man anti-aircraft weapons while Japanese planes strafed the compound. The surprise attack caught the garrison completely unprepared, with most personnel believing the explosions were part of a training exercise, until enemy aircraft appeared overhead. The USS California, moored at the southern end of Battleship Row, took to torpedo hits that flooded her lower compartments. Despite the damage, her crew managed to maintain power and fought back with anti-aircraft guns. The ship's slow flooding allowed most of her crew to escape. Though she eventually settled to the bottom of the harbor, fuel oil fires spread across the water, creating a hellish landscape of flame and smoke. Sailors who had abandoned their ships found themselves swimming through burning oil, many suffering severe burns as they struggled to reach shore. The water itself became a weapon, trapping men in a deadly embrace of fire and sea. As the second wave of attackers completed their runs and turned toward their carriers, Pearl Harbor lay in ruins. The surprise assault had achieved its primary objective. The Pacific Fleet's battle line was shattered, with multiple battleships sunk or severely damaged. Amid the devastation engulfing Pearl Harbor, extraordinary acts of courage emerged from the chaos. Hospital Corpsman First Class John Harlan worked tirelessly aboard the USS West Virginia, tending to wounded sailors while the ship listed heavily to port. Despite repeated explosions and the constant threat of the vessel capsizing, Harlan refused to abandon his post, saving numerous lives through his medical expertise and unwavering dedication. The USS West Virginia's damage control teams, led by Lieutenant Commander Roscoe Hillencoter, fought desperately to counterflood the ship and prevent her from capsizing. Their efforts succeeded in keeping the battleship upright, though she eventually settled to the bottom of the harbor. The counter-flooding operation saved hundreds of lives by preventing the ship from rolling over and trapping her crew beneath the hull. Seaman First Class Doris Miller, an African-American mess attendant aboard the USS West Virginia, demonstrated remarkable heroism during the attack when his battle station became inoperable. Miller carried wounded sailors to safety, including his mortally wounded captain. He then manned a .50 caliber machine gun, a weapon he had never been trained to operate, and fired at attacking Japanese aircraft until ammunition ran out. The USS Maryland, moored inboard of the Oklahoma, suffered relatively minor damage, but her crew provided crucial assistance to their neighboring ship. As the Oklahoma capsized, Maryland's sailors threw lines to men in the water and helped rescue survivors from the overturned hull. Their quick thinking and seamless cooperation saved dozens of lives. At Ford Island's Naval Air Station, Chief Aviation Ordnanceman John Finn established a machine gun position in an exposed area and engaged Japanese aircraft throughout the entire attack. Despite being wounded multiple times by shrapnel and bullets, Finn continued firing at enemy planes, covering fire for personnel attempting to reach shelter. According to testimony preserved in the Congressional Pearl Harbor Investigation Report, such individual acts of heroism occurred throughout the harbor as sailors overcame shock and fear to help their shipmates. The USS Vestal, a repair ship moored alongside the Arizona, found herself in mortal danger when the battleship's magazine exploded. Commander Casson Young ordered the ship to get underway immediately. Despite fires raging across her decks and significant structural damage, the crew's swift action saved the vessel and allowed her to assist in rescue operations. Lieutenant Commander Logan Ramsey at Ford Island's command center managed to transmit the first official word of the attack to higher headquarters. His radio message, "Air Raid Pearl Harbor X This is not drill," alerted military commanders across the Pacific to the unfolding disaster and initiated the American response to Japanese aggression. The destroyer USS Helm, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Chester Carroll, was the first ship to get underway during the attack. Despite navigating through smoke, debris, and continuing aerial assault, Carroll maneuvered his vessel toward the harbor entrance, demonstrating exceptional seamanship under extreme conditions. Civilian workers at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard showed remarkable courage by remaining at their posts to assist with damage control and firefighting efforts. Many risked their lives to help rescue sailors from burning ships, working alongside military personnel without regard for their own safety. The hospital ship USS Solace, identifiable by her white hull and red crosses, became a beacon of hope. Amid the destruction, her medical staff worked around the clock to treat wounded sailors brought from damaged ships, while her crew assisted in rescue operations throughout the harbor. As Japanese aircraft departed for their carriers, they left behind a transformed Pearl Harbor. The surprise attack had achieved tactical success, but it had also revealed the courage and resilience of American servicemen, who would carry the memory of this day into the global conflict that lay ahead. As the last Japanese aircraft disappeared over the horizon at approximately 10 o'clock that morning, Pearl Harbor lay shrouded in smoke and devastation. The once proud Pacific Fleet presented a scene of unprecedented destruction, with 8 battleships damaged or sunk, 3 light cruisers severely damaged, and numerous destroyers and auxiliary vessels crippled or destroyed. The human cost proved even more staggering. 2,403 Americans had perished in the attack, with 1,178 wounded. The USS Arizona alone accounted for 1,177 deaths, making her the war's most devastating single ship loss. Many of the dead remained entombed within their vessels, creating underwater graves that would rest undisturbed for decades. Rear Admiral Husband Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet, surveyed the carnage with a mixture of grief and determination. The attack had caught his forces completely unprepared, despite numerous intelligence warnings that had failed to reach the right personnel. At the critical moment, the Admiral's career would not survive the subsequent investigations, but his immediate concern focused on organizing rescue operations and preparing for possible follow-up attacks. The USS Oklahoma presented perhaps the most heartbreaking sight. In the harbor, the battleship had capsized completely, her hull rising above the water like a massive steel whale. Rescue crews could hear tapping from within the overturned vessel, indicating that sailors remained trapped alive in air pockets. The race to save these men would continue for days, with cutting torches working around the clock to reach the survivors. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua led rescue operations aboard the Arizona, coordinating efforts to evacuate survivors from the burning battleship. Despite the continuing explosions and intense heat, rescue teams managed to save several hundred sailors from the forward sections of the ship before the fires became too intense to approach. as referenced in the official after-action report filed by Pacific Fleet Headquarters. The attack's success stemmed largely from the Japanese achievement of complete tactical surprise, catching American forces in a peacetime posture. With minimal defensive preparations, the psychological impact of the attack extended far beyond Pearl Harbor itself. News of the surprise assault spread rapidly across the United States, transforming American public opinion overnight. The isolationist sentiment that had dominated political discourse for years crumbled in the face of this direct attack on American soil. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt received word of the attack while at his Hyde Park estate in New York. The president immediately returned to Washington, where he would craft the speech that would define American entry into World War II. His words about a date which will live in infamy would rally the nation and unite Americans behind the war effort. The strategic implications of the attack became clear as military leaders assessed the damage. While the battleships had suffered catastrophic losses, the Pacific Fleet's aircraft carriers had fortunately been at sea during the attack. The USS Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga would form the core of America's naval counteroffensive in the months ahead. Japanese Admiral Nagumo faced a critical decision as his task force prepared to withdraw. Several of his subordinate commanders urged him to launch a third wave of attacks to destroy Pearl Harbor's fuel storage facilities and repair shops. The destruction of these shore installations would have extended the harbor's recovery time by months, but Nagumo chose caution over aggression. The fuel tank farms on Ford Island contained 4.5 million barrels of oil, enough to sustain the entire Pacific Fleet for 6 months. The destruction would have crippled American naval operations far more effectively than sinking battleships, which could eventually be raised and repaired. The Japanese task force began its withdrawal toward home waters, having achieved tactical success while potentially missing the opportunity for strategic victory. The attack had eliminated the Pacific Fleet's battle line, but had failed to destroy the infrastructure necessary for sustained naval operations. As darkness fell over Pearl Harbor, the scope of the disaster became apparent. America's sense of invulnerability had been shattered in a single morning, but the nation's resolve had been forged in the fires of that same attack. The news of Pearl Harbor's destruction spread across the American mainland like wildfire, carried by radio broadcasts that interrupted regular Sunday programming. Families gathered around their radio sets, listening in stunned silence as reporters described the unimaginable scenes of destruction in Hawaii. The attack had shattered America's geographic isolation and thrust the nation into a global conflict that would reshape the world. In Washington, Secretary of War Henry Stimson received the first fragmentary reports while attending a private luncheon. The initial messages were so incredible that many officials questioned their accuracy. How could the Japanese Navy have approached Hawaii undetected? How could the vaunted Pacific Fleet have been caught so completely off guard? The White House became a center of frantic activity as military leaders and government officials rushed to assess the situation. General George Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, coordinated with Admiral Harold Stark, Chief of Naval Operations, to determine the full extent of the disaster and organize an immediate response. President Roosevelt convened his war cabinet that evening, bringing together the men who would lead America through its greatest military challenge. The president's calm demeanor belied the gravity of the situation as he listened to damage reports and considered the nation's options. The time for neutrality had passed. America would enter the war whether she was prepared or not. The attack's timing had been carefully calculated by Japanese planners to maximize psychological impact. Sunday morning found most Americans at church, spending time with family, or enjoying leisure activities. The contrast between peaceful domestic life and the violence unleashed at Pearl Harbor created a profound sense of vulnerability that penetrated every American home. As documented in contemporary newspaper accounts, including those from the New York Times and Washington Post, the attack united Americans across regional and political divisions in a way that peacetime appeals had never achieved. Across the nation, young men began appearing at military recruiting stations before they had even officially opened on Monday morning. The attack had crystallized American resolve and created a determination to seek revenge against the Japanese Empire. The isolationist movement that had dominated American politics for decades collapsed overnight, replaced by a unified demand for decisive action. The attack's strategic consequences extended far beyond the immediate military damage. Japan had chosen to awaken a sleeping giant whose industrial capacity and human resources dwarfed her own. The decision to attack Pearl Harbor would prove to be one of the most catastrophic strategic miscalculations in military history. In Hawaii, the work of rescue and recovery continued through the night. Searchlights illuminated the harbor as salvage crews worked to reach trapped sailors and assess the damage to sunken vessels. The USS Nevada, beached near Hospital Point to prevent her from sinking in the channel, became a symbol of American resilience and determination to fight back. The economic mobilization triggered by Pearl Harbor would transform American society. The war effort would end the Great Depression, create new opportunities for women and minorities in the workforce, and establish the United States as the world's dominant economic power. The industrial capacity developed during the war would provide the foundation for American prosperity in the post-war era. On December 7, 1941, at 0-7-50-5 hours Hawaiian time, the first Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor. By the time the attack ended 2 hours later, America had been transformed from a reluctant observer of global conflict into the leader of the free world. The surprise attack that was intended to cripple American naval power had instead awakened a nation to its destiny as a global superpower. The morning that shattered peace across the Pacific Ocean had also forged the determination that would ultimately bring peace to the world. Pearl Harbor remains a testament to the price of unpreparedness and the power of national unity. In the face of overwhelming challenges, the sailors who died that December morning had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had awakened a sleeping giant whose strength would prove decisive in the struggle between freedom and tyranny. The date that would live in infamy had become the moment when America assumed her place as the guardian of democratic values and the defender of freedom. Around the world, the local Hawaiian population, including many Japanese Americans, rallied to support the military effort. Civilian doctors and nurses worked alongside military medical personnel to treat the wounded, while local businesses provided supplies and services to support the recovery operation. The attack had made all residents of Hawaii potential targets, creating a shared sense of vulnerability and purpose. Military censorship quickly descended upon the islands as authorities sought to prevent further intelligence from reaching Japanese forces. The full extent of the damage would remain classified for months, though the American public understood that a devastating blow had been struck against their nation's military forces. The FBI began immediate investigations into potential Japanese espionage networks in Hawaii and on the mainland. The attack's precision and timing suggested detailed intelligence gathering, leading to suspicions about the loyalty of Japanese American citizens. These suspicions would soon lead to one of the most controversial domestic policies of the war. As dawn broke on December 8th, America faced a changed world. The attack on Pearl Harbor had ended the nation's isolationist period and begun her transformation into a global superpower. The road ahead would be long and costly, but the determination forged in the fires of that December morning would sustain the nation through its darkest hours. The morning of December 8th, 1941, dawned with an America transformed. President Roosevelt arrived at the Capitol to address a joint session of Congress, his motorcade moving through streets lined with citizens who had gathered to witness this historic moment. The president's speech would be brief but powerful, containing words that would echo through history and define America's entry into World War II. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Roosevelt's voice carried the weight of a nation's anger and determination as he recounted the previous day's events to a hushed chamber. The president's speech lasted only 6 minutes, but its impact was immediate and profound. Congress voted for war, with only one dissenting vote, Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, who had also voted against American entry into World War I. The overwhelming support demonstrated the attack's success in uniting the American people behind the war effort. Within hours of the congressional declaration, the United States found itself at war with the Axis powers. Germany and Italy declared war on America 3 days later, fulfilling their obligations under the tripartite pact with Japan. The conflict that had begun as a surprise attack on a naval base in Hawaii had expanded into a global war that would engulf every continent. The strategic implications of Pearl Harbor extended far beyond the immediate military losses. The attack had eliminated the Pacific Fleet's battle line, but had failed to destroy the infrastructure necessary for sustained naval operations. More importantly, it had galvanized American public opinion and created the political conditions necessary for total war. The Japanese High Command had gambled that a devastating surprise attack would demoralize America and force her to accept Japanese hegemony in the Pacific. Instead, the attack had achieved the opposite effect, creating a national determination to fight until Japan was completely defeated. Admiral Yamamoto's prophetic words about awakening a sleeping giant would prove remarkably prescient. As referenced in declassified military planning documents from the National Archives, American war planners immediately began developing strategies for a two-ocean war. While the nation mobilized its industrial capacity for unprecedented military production, the attack's impact on American society was equally profound. The greatest generation would be forged in the crucible of global conflict, developing the skills, determination, and unity that would make America the world's dominant power. The suburban housewife would become a factory worker, the college student would become a soldier, and the nation would discover capabilities it never knew it possessed. In Pearl Harbor, the work of recovery continued with methodical determination. The USS Oklahoma would be raised from the harbor bottom in one of the most ambitious salvage operations in naval history. The USS Arizona, too badly damaged to repair, would become a memorial to the men who died in her explosion, her hull remaining as an underwater tomb for over 1,000 sailors. The attack had claimed 18 warships sunk or severely damaged, but American industrial capacity would soon replace these losses many times over. The Kaiser shipyards would begin producing Liberty ships at unprecedented rates, while aircraft factories would turn out fighters and bombers in numbers that would overwhelm Japanese defenses. The psychological scars of Pearl Harbor would heal more slowly than the physical damage. The attack had shattered America's sense of invulnerability and demonstrated that geographical isolation no longer guaranteed security. The nation would emerge from the war as a global superpower, but she would never again retreat into isolationism. The Japanese attack had succeeded tactically, but failed strategically. The surprise assault had eliminated the Pacific Fleet's battle line, but had left intact the carriers, submarines, and shore facilities that would form the foundation of America's counteroffensive. More importantly, it had united the American people behind a war effort that would ultimately prove unstoppable. As evening fell on December 8th, America stood at the threshold of her greatest trial. The attack on Pearl Harbor had ended one era and begun another, transforming a reluctant nation into the arsenal of democracy that would lead the free world to victory. The attack on Pearl Harbor would reverberate through American history long after the last echoes of gunfire faded from the Hawaiian morning. In the immediate aftermath, the nation mobilized with a speed and determination that amazed both allies and enemies. The Remember Pearl Harbor battle cry became a rallying point that sustained American forces through for years of global warfare. The strategic consequences of Japan's decision to attack Pearl Harbor became apparent within months. Admiral Chester Nimitz, appointed to replace Admiral Kimmel as Pacific Fleet Commander, began planning the counteroffensive that would eventually drive Japanese forces back across the Pacific. The carriers that had fortunately been absent during the attack enterprise, Lexington and Saratoga, would form the core of American naval power in the coming conflict. The Battle of Midway, fought 6 months after Pearl Harbor, would prove to be the turning point of the Pacific War. American codebreakers working with intelligence gathered from captured Japanese materials, would enable Nimitz to position his forces perfectly to ambush the Japanese fleet. The victory at Midway would demonstrate that Pearl Harbor, while devastating, had not crippled American naval power. The human cost of the attack would be remembered through memorials and monuments, but the strategic lessons learned would prove equally important. Never again would American forces be caught so completely unprepared. The attack led to fundamental changes in military intelligence gathering, early warning systems, and defensive preparations that would serve the nation well in the Cold War and beyond. The USS Arizona Memorial, dedicated in 1962, would become one of America's most visited national monuments. The structure, built directly over the sunken battleship's hull, serves as both a tomb for the sailors who died in the attack and a reminder of the price of unpreparedness. Oil still seeps from the Arizona's fuel tanks, creating what visitors call the Tears of the Arizona. The attack's impact on American society extended far beyond military considerations. The internment of Japanese Americans, one of the darkest chapters in American history, stemmed directly from the paranoia and fear generated by Pearl Harbor. Over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry would be forcibly relocated to detention camps, a violation of civil liberties that would later be recognized as a grave injustice. As documented in the official Pearl Harbor attack hearings conducted by Congress, the attack exposed fundamental weaknesses in American intelligence gathering and military coordination that would lead to significant reforms in national security procedures. The technological advances spurred by Pearl Harbor would reshape modern warfare. Radar technology, which might have detected the approaching Japanese aircraft if properly deployed, would be rapidly improved and widely implemented. Aircraft carrier operations, demonstrated so effectively by the Japanese attack, would become the dominant form of naval warfare. The attack also accelerated American development of amphibious warfare capabilities. The island-hopping campaign that would eventually bring American forces to Japan's doorstep began with lessons learned from Pearl Harbor about the importance of combined arms operations and coordinated air-sea assaults. The psychological impact of Pearl Harbor on American foreign policy would persist long after the war ended. The surprise attack created a national determination never again to be caught unprepared, leading to the establishment of permanent military bases around the world and the creation of intelligence agencies designed to prevent future surprise attacks.